Hi, my name is Girish, your host for today for Back to Basics. Today we have I'm going to say an educator, a trainer, a coach, whatever you want to call her, but let's get into the business of how and who and what she is. Her name is Chelsea Robertson, and we are going to go and talk to Chelsea today and dive into her details about her whole company and whole website, that small network that she has. So Chelsea, thank you for coming on my show.
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, first thing is first, before we get into all the basics of that, Chelsea, did you have your cup of coffee yet?
I've had several,
You
so
had
we're
several,
good.
because I've been told that you are a coffee person, and I just want to make sure that we make that clear.
Oh, for sure. Well,
Okay.
definitely, yes.
So, Chelsea, what does back to basic mean to you?
I think I love the concept because it's kind of like, what is your foundation? What are your roots and what is your why? And ensuring that we stay aligned with that, like the basics of what we're doing without getting lost in, the giant picture, but being able to see the intention at the bottom.
So is that a shame that we don't sometimes understand the basics of what we're doing throughout the day and throughout the goal that you're trying to face? Is that
Uh, I think that adds unnecessary challenges. And a lot of what I end up doing in conversations that I have with clients and with other educators is when we lose focus of our why, of our basics, of our intention, and we get lost
yeah,
in, everything else and we
yeah,
miss so much.
yeah. I totally agree with that, and I think my goal of my podcast is to make sure that people are aware of certain topics that I bring up on my show, and that's where my basics are. So
Yeah.
so the when I went on your website and I went on your Instagram and your LinkedIn, okay, the first thing came in my mind is, wow, the things that you have done so far has gone a long way. I'll tell you that. The other thing is a hashtag. What could go wrong? Hashtag. So explain that to me how that happened.
Well, to put it all kind of condensed into one little story was at my previous job that I had before I did full-time consulting, they brought me in to kind of rebuild the school from the bottom up, and it had experienced a lot of transitions, a lot of challenges. And so my role was to come in, address the challenges, and implement entirely new systems.
Yeah.
And this was a 30-year-old school, and it was fairly large. So it was going to be a kind of a challenging thing, which is my favorite thing to do. When it looks
Sure.
insurmountable, I'm like 100%, I'm in, let's do it.
Yeah.
But it was hard. And the first thing we had to really tackle was the mindset of the people that I was working with.
Mm,
And I'm a big believer in growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And
yes.
so this whole what could go wrong concept is kind of slang for growth mindset. It's like, let's have a growth mindset. Let's just try it because, what could really go wrong? And if it goes wrong, we can fix it. Like, as long as no one's injured, we can totally do this. And so it kind of just became this thing that I would say to my staff, especially my leadership team. We would say, let's try something new. And they'd be like, and I'd be like, what could go wrong? And it kind of just picked up. And then they started saying it back to me and then to their teams. And it kind of just expanded, it rippled into the school. And then when I transitioned out of that position and into what I'm doing now, it just kind of followed me.
Yeah, I mean that hashtag when I was reading, you can take in both ways. You can take positive or negative out of that sentence,
Yeah,
and then go which angle that you want to go to.
right.
It's like saying what if, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So this is like another what if comment and the hashtag I should say. So it's cool. Thank you so much for that. Uh, Now the question which I think you have been asked many times, most people or most teachers, do they love the kids or do they not love the kids or do they teach the kids? Explain that to me because I think I don't know how to question that because it seems like we love the kids when we want to be a teacher, but
Right.
is it because you love the kids or do you want to educate the kids? How do you answer that question?
You know, that's a hard question. And I think it can be both and. I
Okay.
think, we many times, many of the educators that I've worked with or had the privilege of being educated under, right? Because I'm always learning,
Yes.
is both things, right? They love the children, they love the learners that they're working with, which might have been what led them to the field. And then a lot of times once you start working in that, you realize that being able to teach concepts and see and like guide curiosity of learners and then see them start to, when they pick that up, when that light bulb goes on, it's like, ooh, I love that too. And so you love the child originally. That's kind of the foundation for it, right? The basics. I love learners and children. And then when you start to see them learn and those little light bulbs are going off, that's a whole nother level of excitement.
But loving the kids the way we love the kids, okay, and teaching them is that you're gonna strangle them because you get a little impatient. Is that the right word? So how does that work with love and patience?
It is a learned ability, I do believe. And it was something that I trained on when I was a director, was how we engage with the child. And it all comes back to two things. And I think a basis of relationship, because
Yes.
you're more likely to have a positive interaction with that child or extended patience if you
Yes.
have a positive relationship with that child. So that's really important. And then the mindset of going into it, understanding that behavior, whatever that behavior is that might be making you crazy, is a form of communication. And so taking that as a form of communication and then using that to communicate back with them
Mm-hmm.
and teaching them a modeling for them a more positive form of communication,
Mm-hmm.
those two things, relationship and mindset, when you're going into those types of situations,
Yes.
allows you for an extended patience window.
So, I've noticed that the 2, 3 questions that I've asked you, it seems like the main answer that you're giving me is mindset.
It's true.
So
Yeah.
so how is that possible? Because it could be other answers too. It could be, I don't know, relationships, right? But is mindset and relationship kind of the hand in hand type of thing, or?
I mean, those are kind of my go-to answers, right?
Yes.
I find in my experience
Yes.
that so many things, if you take it all the way back down to the basics, right, to the
Yes.
foundation, then
Yes.
it's going to be, what was your mindset
Yeah.
and what was your relationship? And
Yes.
everything else is just extra. And if you can really find those, if you can really understand those well, then they feed into all the practices that come from it.
So we're only talking about schools, but then even workplace. Let's say, for example, if I actually went to a work place, and if I'm an associate director, I act like an associate director, or do I act like a coworker to give them directions?
You
So what do
know,
you think?
I think, I do. So when I was leading a team, I had a team of about at any point between 50 to 75 people on my team.
Hmm.
And the way that we structured it was what we called a round team. So it was, how do we tear down this hierarchy, right? Where the leader is at the top and everyone falls beneath them.
Yeah.
And how do we switch that up into where we all work together in a collaborative, right? The
Yes.
genius of the collaboration is really where it is,
Yeah.
because it's never about that one person. It's always about everybody bringing something to the table.
That's right.
And so I think, in a roundabout way to answer your question, is the title really doesn't even matter. It's how are you interacting and collaborating with the people around you in a central focus. And so for us in a school and whatever the workplace is, what is the central focus? For us, it was the student, was the learner. And then we ensured that all of our practices surrounded around them. And as long as we were collaborating into that central focus as a round team, then that really fed the way that we were interacting with each other, regardless of our
So
titles.
you're saying that I walk into the company as an associate director, thinking in my mind, yes, I am an associate director, but as a mindset to talk to other people should be as equal as a coworker to get as people they say, get your shit done. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
So
that is I think the healthiest approach to working inside of a team.
yeah. So how does the teacher and the student happen? I think this teacher can't be a student or the student can't be a teacher. So how do you work that relationship? Because that's a little different than the workplace. But how does it work in the school environment?
I like to talk about the concept of co-constructivism, right?
Okay.
So instead of the educator always standing at the front of the student and telling them, here's what you need to do, here's how you need to do it just like this, and I'll grade you at the end,
Mm-hmm.
it's allowing that student to have some autonomy and being side by side
Mm-hmm.
instead of front and behind. And
Mm.
so it's the teacher coming alongside the learner and saying, how could we attack this? How could we interact? What can we do together? How can I support you in your learning? And so I think that's kind of a different spin on a possible a traditional teacher-student relationship or a boss-employee relationship. It's about co-constructing, let's build this together
Yeah.
instead of do it just this way and I'll grade you at the end.
So you're talking more, I think it sounds like that you're talking about collaboration,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
I think collaboration between the student and the teacher is important or
Mhm.
not important.
Oh, it's necessary. I think it's vital
It's
because we're
vital.
we're looking for that student to find their autonomy, to be able to find out what they want to learn, why they want to learn it, and have that passion for what they're doing. And unless they're given a seat at the table, unless they're treated as someone who's co-constructing their own future, then it becomes so much more challenging.
But Chelsea, I mean, that's your thought process and mine, right? But then what about the teachers and the administration for school who's been there for years and they're still in the old mindset of how to teach the kids versus today? How do we change and pivot over to the new style of teaching?
That is the $1 million question.
Yeah,
And it is a conversation that I'm having all the time.
yeah,
And I really think, since I'm on a pattern here, right, it comes back to mindset. It comes
yeah.
back to, what I always kind of say is one conversation at a time.
Mm,
Is we're introducing these concepts one conversation at a time, one small action at a time. And a lot of times on my podcast, where we talk about these huge concepts of how are we going to shift education into the now? How are we going to build student autonomy, student-led learning, et cetera, et cetera?
yeah, yeah,
And that's a big concept. That's a big ship to turn.
yeah,
But what it really comes down to is the teachers in the classrooms if they can learn a little bit at a time about the way that students learn, or kind of shift into this future oriented learning just a little bit at a time, and put a
yeah.
little bit of practice at a time, and be open to new concepts a little bit at a time,
Mm.
then we'll see that shift start to take place.
Yeah, but it's tough to shift from left to right,
Hmm.
and pivot over, as what they say. Um, I think they're still working in the old agile moment versus the new one. I don't even know what the new word is if the old one is agile. Is there a word to use that? Let's say, I don't know, 2021. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of times we're just talking about future oriented learning. What does future oriented learning look like?
Yeah, yeah. So Chelsea, explain to people what is your company and what do you run and what do you try? What is your goal to do this here?
So my overarching goal, to put it simply, is to move education forward, right? So
Mhm,
what are we doing to push the limits of traditional education?
mhm,
And the way that I do that in practice is I partner with education leaders, education innovators, forward thinkers of all. They don't have to be just school leaders. I work with inclusive playground models, charter schools, public schools, private schools, ed tech companies, et cetera, right? Anybody who's trying to push the limits of education and inclusive play, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really just, how can I further your mission? So when I
mhm,
originally started thinking I want to do something to further education, when I stopped being a director,
mhm,
a lot of people were saying you could start your own this company, curriculum company, that training company, whatever.
mhm,
And what I really felt like was there are so many forward thinkers in education who are doing so many amazing things to push education forward.
mhm,
How can I partner with them?
mhm.
So instead of bringing another brand to the table, another concept to sell or push, what I really love to do is get behind people who are already doing really cool things and
Yeah.
helping them push their mission forward.
So Chelsea, do you call yourself an educator, or do you call yourself a coach, or do you call yourself? What?
Uh,
It's a tough
you know,
question because you know what? Because I was looking at your website and I was looking at your LinkedIn when I contacted you on LinkedIn and I looked
yeah.
everywhere. I don't think there's a word for what you do.
I don't know. That's a great question. I have never really given myself a title. If I have to go back to something, I'll say like an education consultant. But I am an educator. That was my training. That's my trade.
Yeah,
That's what I did for so long. My
yeah,
background is child development.
yeah.
So somewhere between educator, education consultant, person who wants to make the world better. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. So Chelsea, I was reading your website, and there's this one line that I actually like. Is it okay if I read that line out of your
Yeah.
website? It actually says, "Children deserve the best, and passionate people in all roles of education strive to create it daily." Explain that, because you know what, that was quite sweet and on the top of it, or on the point, I should say. So
Yeah.
explain how that happened.
I think, a lot of that comes down to if you're in education, you have a responsibility to be intentional with it.
Yeah,
And when I was working with teachers, a lot of the conversations I would have if you no longer love what you do, then don't do it.
yeah,
Because the impact that you're having in education is in the lives of generations. And so
yeah.
this is a big deal. And
Yes.
so if you're going to do it well or get out of the way. And that's kind of, the really kind way to say that, what I
Sure.
said on my website,
Yes,
instead of
yes.
saying do it well or get out of the way, or at least do it with intention.
I think you meant to
Um,
say bleep, bleep, bleep.
but it's fine.
I totally get that. So, thank you for that, Chelsea. So, there must be a common statement that people tell you every single time of how to fix their problem. Is it, I don't know how to start it, or I don't know, have I don't know if I can get this done? What is the common statements do you get? I can tell you one, but you tell me what you, if take a guess what I'm gonna say. Go ahead.
A lot of times it's I've I have this idea. I've kind of gotten it started and then now I'm stuck, or it's too big and I can't break it down into smaller pieces,
Yeah.
or I don't know what I've done. I've made a terrible mistake.
S-
That's usually where
So the
I
statement
am getting the
I
call.
the statement I think that you get quite often is, "This is what I have always done."
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So okay, so how do you fix that problem with that statement?
Well, if I said mindset, would I? And that is so common because it's comfortable there. It's
Yes.
comfortable, whether or not it's truly effective,
Yeah.
or even if it's really hard,
Yeah.
we know that hard.
Yeah.
We don't have to do something different because even if it sucks, we know what to expect and we can just do it over and over again, because it's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't know
That's right.
kind of thing,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So that they get stuck in this, but we've always done it that way and it seems to be just fine. Like I turned out okay. So it's probably fine. And that is a mindset thing. It's like, look, I know that this is comfortable, but can you prove to me that it's working?
Hmm.
Can you relate it back to your why? What's your mission statement and how are your actions lining up with that and
Hmm.
getting you to the objectives that you need? Unless you can prove that to me, I refuse to say that just because you're doing it for 30 years means that it's effective. And
Yeah.
that's scary.
But Chelsea, when you got onto this platform, or this whole network thing that you're doing, because I don't know, educator, right? That's what we came up with.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so let's say you got onto this pedestal of educator. Was there a broken process that you said, I need to fix this? What triggered you to get into this?
Into
Or did your kids or yourself felt that there was a problem? How did that happen?
how did I get into education, like from the very beginning? Like, how
Well,
did I end up in this field?
that too, but I'm talking the problem that we're all facing right now with the pivot over.
Yeah. So Most of that, I mean, I've always been in education, but most of starting to see like, okay, this is a recurring issue that I assumed once people got out of early education, they would solve it, but we're seeing this issue recur. And that was with my own girls. I have two girls, a 9 and 11-year-old,
Okay.
who have been through every version of education, right? They've done public, private, charter, homeschool, et cetera. And now we're kind of doing an unschooling model. But that was when I started to see these consistent things happening and going, my gosh, this isn't working, even for either side of the spectrum. It's just not working.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that we pay too much of taxes and not getting enough back from the school, or do we think that we need to teach the school individually or the township individually?
That's a big question, but a lot of processes that are done inside of schools are done because they have to do those in order to get funding.
Yes.
And so I don't think it's that we pay too much taxes and schools are overfunded. I think it's that we have a real overhaul that needs to be done of what's being funded, what we're using as measurements for success.
Yeah. Because you know what? There are some few struggles for, I don't know why. I think we're concentrating more on elementary, isn't it? But I think the problem is also middle school and high school also. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the problem that I think most of us are facing is, how can I educate my kid to get a better education for college, for their work? So I think lately what I have noticed is finance and accounting is a big curriculum before you graduate high school. Mm-hmm. Is that a new pivot change, do you think?
I think it's always been, there in pieces. I remember in 5th grade, having to balance a checkbook, right? In my curriculum, which I couldn't do now. So don't ask me. Yeah. But I think I'm starting to see that push happen more and more, because these conversations of, I graduated high school and have no idea how to do my tax returns, right? These everyday concepts that aren't being introduced. And so the question, like, there's some really funny TikToks out there about, hey, I know how to balance an algebraic equation, but I have no idea what my tax return should look like, right? Now, which of these is more applicable to daily life or should be inside of our curriculum?
Yeah.
And so I am excited to see that starting to be pushed more and more into education.
So Chelsea, here's a funny thing. Okay. So during my high school time, I had this one period which was free because obviously I took care of everything else. So there was nothing. So there was nothing to do. So they gave me a choice, and they gave me several choices. Like sewing, cooking, and all the other stuff, including typing class. I said, you know what, typing class could be an easy A.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't. That's a separate topic altogether. Finally, I got to the top A. That's a separate topic. But the thing is that I thought typing is just boring, and I had no clue that it's going to be a good future, no future at all. I just wanted to take the class. And now each and every day of my life today, thank God I took that typing class.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm trying to say is, I think these finance classes and accounting classes that high school is providing us today is going to help the kids forget the taxes, but maybe just understand how to minus in your head that, if it is $16, you're giving 20, how many are you going to get back? Are you going to get back 2, or are you going to get back 4?
Right, right.
So those are the things I think I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah.
So one thing, Chelsea, is I think you mentioned on a lot in different interviews that I've seen, something about circle culture, structure. So explain that to me. The round team. So to explain that.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of what I was talking about earlier about going away from the hierarchical structure of an organizational chart, right?
Yeah.
Kind of tearing that down and working in a circular team and a round team. And that was one of the first things I did at the school that I had worked at prior to this was kind of burn down this hierarchy model and put all of us together. And so the way that it looked on paper was we looked for what our central focus was. And in this case, it was the students and the family. And they belong at the middle of our circle. And then who's closest to them, who has the most impact to them day to day? And that was the classroom teachers. And so they are in a circle right outside the students and the families. And then our structure, we had another group of directors that worked with the teachers. And so they kind of came as a circle right outside the teachers. And then it was myself and my leadership team outside of that, and then the leadership council outside of that. And so if you're looking at it in that way, we all work kind of collaboratively with each other. And the cool part of it is look at all the cushion that you've now created around your central focus. Because my question is, on a traditional organizational chart, where are the people that you're serving? Are they on the chart? They're not even represented. Where do they fit? It's kind of like they're an afterthought. And so in this concept, in this round team, they're at the very focus, the very center, and everything else is built around them. And that's how we ensured that our daily actions and how we were supporting each other always came back to what our mission was, and that was the students and the families.
So, Chelsea, when I heard that first time on one of the interviews, the first picture came in my mind is an onion, because an onion has several layers, right? And the main focus is the inside of that onion. So, I mean, that's how I look at it. So I don't know what fruit or what vegetable comes in your mind when you describe that, but that's what it came in my mind.
Definitely right? All the layers, like you get all the layers.
You get all the layers, right?
All the layers, yeah.
So that covered it. So I think that was my epiphany for me
right?
when I got that. Is there like an algorithm or a program or some data or something that we collected to see that there is problems in certain elementary, middle school, high school, and where should we tackle these issues, or is it a individual basis? How do we fix that?
I think it's more, I think both, right? I mean, we know that there are overarching issues inside of this, like the way that children learn may not be through a textbook and with grades. So that's a big overarching issue. But then there's also a lot smaller things, because education, students learning is highly individualized. So there is no, here's the answer. There is no one size fits all. I can solve the problem like this, because it's so individualized. And that's kind of the blessing and the curse of it, right? Is we can't just say, here's our one solution to everything. All we need is $1 billion and we can solve education. That's just not the case, because children learn in such a unique way, and to be able to serve them in a unique way is hard.
But Chelsea, if you have 7 kids in one classroom, okay, I swear to God, out of those 7 kids, they'll have different levels. You cannot teach the same thing to all the 7 kids. No. So how do you differentiate between that? Do you make a group of saying, here's the dummy ones, and here are the smart ones, and here are the middle ones? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, how do we can't do that, because then you're discriminating kids like that. So how do we balance it out like that?
And that's really challenging inside of large ISDs and large schools, and the way that they have to say, here's gifted and talented, here's our SPED students, here's our Gen Ed students, right? And they do have to put them in different places so they can serve them in that way. And I disagree with the ability of that model to serve every child, because one, there are more than 3 types of students. And nobody fits in one box, right? So if you're saying, here's my 3 boxes, fit in one of these, what if you don't fit in any of the boxes? And so the school that I ran, the first school that I ran, we had a program that went all the way through first grade. And our classrooms were about 7 students to 1 teacher. And it wasn't about pushing them towards this certain level. It was about meeting them where they were and allowing them to explore their curiosity. So instead of, we created a space for them to learn and explore at their pace, rather than trying to force them all into this one pace that then had to label them as gifted and talented SPED or Gen Ed. We didn't have to do that, because we were creating a space where everybody could learn at their own pace.
Don't you think that we should have one of each and make that as a group?
having differentiated experiences inside of a group, absolutely. I think there should be, I love when students of different grade levels and different ability levels are all brought together, because
Yeah.
then they're able to work together and experience from those around them. Absolutely.
So thank you for that. So Chelsea, obviously with these tough times that we're having, it's been a year now, over a year that we've, remote work from home. So for youngsters, this is how I feel. I don't know about anyone else, but the people or grades between preschool to kindergarten to maybe first grade or second grade, it is tough to teach those guys for working from home or
Yeah.
studying at home. How do you
Hmm.
work that? Because it seems like you're gonna waste maybe a year out of their life not collaborating with students and friends. That's a separate
Hmm.
topic altogether. I'm talking
Right.
just education in general. So
Yeah.
how do we catch up?
This is a hot topic. And my opinion on that, as an early educator,
Yeah.
is that learning takes place all the time. And so it's not about how are we going to meet these regimented classroom standards to get
Yeah.
them to pass this, standardized test at the end. How are we ensuring that we're meeting those? I personally am of the belief that learning loss, especially for our younger students, is irrelevant.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing around learning loss, learning loss, learning loss. Well, children are going to learn how they're going to learn. And all we need to do is introduce them to the concepts. And especially for the younger learners, it's about creating opportunities for them to experience, not about how can we recreate the exact same classroom that they would have had at school at home. It's
Yeah.
now transitioning to, okay, we're not going to have that classroom, but we can still offer them experiences. We can still allow them to go to the grocery store with their masks and all their things and help me buy groceries and help me pick out things. And there's your math lesson. I mean, take it out into the world
Yeah.
and use that unique opportunity to have them experience things that they wouldn't have experienced inside the classroom, because we're
But
not
I
going to be able to
think,
recreate it.
yeah, but I think it's not the school or the teacher's job only. I mean,
Correct. Oh,
it's
for
also
sure.
parents too. I mean, it
Yes.
goes hand in hand, and that's how I think your word is. It's amazing when you say that it's relationship and collaboration, which means vice versa between teachers and parents, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because a parent is a child's first teacher.
Exactly.
And they're forever teacher, right? The teacher at the school has them for a year, if that, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's all about how the parent is allowing for the opportunity for that child to learn, especially now.
Yes, yes. I mean, today nowadays it's very tough. But how do we balance work versus school? Separate topic altogether. But
Yeah.
it's a shame for the kids and how we can. My daughter, she's been remotely all this time, and me and my wife, we made a decision that what, I think she should go at least twice a week
Mm-hmm.
school. And when she went there, you should see the pivot behavior,
Yeah.
and so it's a shame of how we're going through this.
Yeah. It
So
is.
Chelsea, I think there's a one statement that I think you've mentioned on most of your interviews, and you said Chelsea knowledge of nuggets. Is that a true statement?
It's I did an interview on a podcast a while back, one of my first podcast interviews, and Alfonso was the name of the guy who did the interview,
Yeah.
my ed tech life, and he kind of deemed that. So it's like hashtag Chelsea wisdom nuggets or Chelsea nuggets or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I saw that
And it's just kind
interview.
of floating around. Yeah.
It's pretty funny when I read that.
Yeah. He still will come onto my shows sometimes and like leave comments of, Chelsea wisdom nuggets or whatever. And it's funny.
So, any last words before we leave you alone? I guess.
No, I mean, I think I heard this on a podcast this morning, and I think it's super relevant to education today, especially now where it's not, ideal as we might see, is that there are no bad experiences. There are just experiences.
Yeah.
It's what we then take from them and how we use them next. And so I think if we can have that mindset, while we're working with our learners in this year and a half, however long of weird, instead of saying, oh, woe are we for what we're having to deal with, it's, okay, cool. What can we get from this? Like, what could go wrong? What can we figure out from this, and how can we evolve in the future? Would be a great mindset to go into it with.
So basically, what could go wrong? I mean, that's the title of this episode, it looks like. What can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
But thank you again, Chelsea, for giving us, or I should say, give me an insight of what's going on in the world. And we had an idea, but it looks like you're diving right into the problem and getting it resolved. And hopefully, we'll see your name pop up everywhere now, Chelsea. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, guys, thank you again for listening with Chelsea. Now, what did she say? She says that she's diving into the problems of teachers and parents and kids and educators and township and school. I mean, we all need to, there's only one answer. The one answer is mindset. The mindset needs to come in play. That is what Chelsea's trying to do, trying to change, I should say, people's mindset, right? And what could go wrong is just the mindset. So as always, there is a quote of the day for on this show, and here's a quote of the day that I came up with. Learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. That's by John Holt. So guys, as usual, as always, what could go wrong? Remember, everything goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless. See you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
A B2B professional networking platform. Okay. And what I mean by that is more business to business.
Yeah.
So the B2C, for example, may happen on Instagram, business to consumer, or Facebook. LinkedIn is positioning itself and really catering to that professional to professional in network. So what we're seeing there is the ability to leverage your brand in order to create opportunities to then take those opportunities offline. Now, I just want to make an important point. When we talk about social media and selling, we never, ever, ever sell on social media. We use the word social selling, and we'll talk a bit about it soon because